Hey, welcome to the Wealth Agenda. I'm your host, Tania Brielle Mabrey, and I have with us Todd Pilot, IP attorney extraordinaire, and this is our extended interview.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So, I have some questions for you that I did not ask a little bit earlier. So, the first one that I want to ask is I recently was watching a video on YouTube, and it was a video of Robert Kiyosaki, who is the author of the book series and conglomerate now, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what stuck out to me was that he made the statement that the biggest moneymaker in his portfolio, it wasn't his investments, it wasn't his real estate, it wasn't, anything in particular that his rich dad told him, but it was actually his IP portfolio. And it just struck me, and I thought, man, like, how could I do that? How could I make my IP portfolio my biggest moneymaker? So what advice would you give to those out there who have ideas, who have imagination, who are thinking about how to grow their wealth? What advice would you give them for making their IP portfolio their biggest moneymaker?
Good question. With respect to you, I think it's important to make sure that you own your content. You're creating content, and content is king right now.
Yes.
To the extent that folks like you can create content, you can license that content to various networks and broadcasting entities. Um, Outside of that, we see, the IP is a very broad spectrum.
I can imagine.
Inventions, that falls within the IP spectrum, and so folks who have created inventions, securing the patents for that intellectual property before it goes out into the general public. It's important.
Okay.
um,
So don't just be running to social media with your ideas before you've secured it a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And everybody's familiar with NDAs. It's important that when you're speaking.
Well, let's not assume. What's an NDA? Because we might have some viewers that might not know what that is.
I'm sorry, non-disclosure agreements.
Okay.
And so when you have a good idea and you're speaking with potential partners, potential investors, it's important to have them, sign a non-disclosure agreement,
Yes.
indicating and agreeing that they will not disclose or use this information that you're disclosing to them against you. That's a very important step.
So step one, NDA.
NDA in terms of communicating with others, and that's important too with in inventors. And non-compete agreements. You want to have the appropriate paperwork there. I've seen any number of folks who have come up with a product or an invention, and they've contracted with an entity to manufacture it. And we've seen this in China and places like that, only to find their product being sold by other companies.
Yeah, the knockoffs are
That's right.
prominent.
That's right. And so just making sure that those things are documented. In the copyright space, it's important to copyright works of art,
Okay.
books, music, songs, things like that.
Oh yeah, so I can't wait to talk about some of the things that you've seen in music.
Sure, no problem at all. In general business, we live in a branding age.
Yes, we
where
do.
Branding is everything, and that's actually nothing new. Brands, people, once they identify with and trust a brand, they will purchase items under that brand, even though they may be more expensive.
Yes, that's
They
true.
may not even be superior products, but they trust the brands.
So you have to protect the brand.
You have to protect that brand because at the end of the day, you you're probably not going to be able to stop people from selling the same product or a similar product.
Mm.
You're probably not going to be able to stop others from providing the same services or similar services,
Mm-hmm.
even within the context of a restaurant. And you know, you won't be able to stop someone else from selling shrimp and grits,
Mm.
but your shrimp and grits have to be
Yoshim
the
with the
best.
good sausage and the good
People,
sauce and the good
people,
butter.
right? People need to know that Milk and Honey has the best shrimp and grits around,
Yes.
and
So when you add the brand to the shrimp and
that's right.
grits, that's when you can protect it.
That you're protecting that brand,
Okay.
and
Okay.
and sometimes in the restaurant space, folks will come up with a product
Mm-hmm.
that is also branded. And
Yeah.
so, McDonald's has the Big Mac. So you
Mm-hmm.
better believe that the Big Mac is protected and
Yes.
trademark.
Yes.
Burger King has the Whopper, and of course that's
So it's
protected.
double trademarked.
That's right. So McDonald's is trademarked, and of
Mm-hmm.
course the Big Mac and the Quarter Pounder are also trademarked as well. So
So you
you
want your
start.
brand protected and you want your products protected if you.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct, and and that happens quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So we have a lot that we covered there. So we talked about copyrights, we talked about trademarks, we talked about non-compete agreements,
We talked about patents a
we
little
talk
bit.
about patents
Mhm,
and NDAs, right?
mhm.
So for someone who may be intimidated by that, or for someone who has never worked with an attorney or a law firm, what would advice would you give to make it more approachable for them?
You know, that's a good question. I think attorney relationships are very similar to other professional relationships that one
Hmm.
has. It's important to work with someone that you can get along with and that you
Okay.
trust,
Okay.
and they get you, they understand you, they respect
Yes.
you. And so I think most of my business comes from referral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember when I was in private practice, you know, uh, I didn't even want to get a website. I was like, why? Got plenty of business here.
Yeah, that's great.
But the key to that is that when a friend sends someone to me,
Mm-hmm.
I know I have to take care of them. Otherwise, I'm going to have to deal
Yes,
with that
because then
friend.
your name on the street is
That's
gonna
right.
be trash. You don't
That's
want
right.
that.
You want to be able to see that
And that
friend at a
friend might know where
cocktail
you
party.
live.
That's right. But most people, when I need a doctor or any professional,
Yes.
I reach out to my friend network,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually we get to the right
Yes.
person.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
I like that. That's actually really good because when we need our hair done, we go to a hairstylist. When
right.
we are sick, we go to a doctor. When our car breaks down, we go to a mechanic. And it doesn't feel intimidating to call
Mhm.
a stylist and say, "Hey girl, I need my braids done," right?
Right.
But there is some level of intimidation. I think maybe we glorify it in some way when it's like, "Oh, we need an IP attorney." And there's that level of intimidation that can come up, which I think is why so many people don't
Mhm,
protect their brand sometimes. And
mhm.
so I love making it relatable to anything else you do. So if you have a business name, if you have an idea, then just like you would go to the mechanic, you need to go see
That
an
is
IP
right.
attorney.
That's right.
I
That
like
is right.
that. That's really
That's right.
good.
And not just any attorney. I mean,
The ones
yeah,
that you ask your friends about.
that is correct. I mean, if
Some referrals, some Google reviews.
I had an SUV that had transmission issues, and
Mm,
I would took it to a couple of different shops
yeah.
until I got a recommendation for this transmission place. It's all they did, and they
Mm,
were good at it.
yes.
And so there were some places that wanted to do it,
Hmm.
and all they were going to do was send it to the transmission place.
Ah,
So
find a specialist.
find a specialist, and try to avoid the folks who are trying to do something that they don't know how to do or that they don't have the expertise in.
That's good.
You want to go to the source.
Pay attention to the flags. When you
That's
start
right.
seeing those flags, pay attention. No, that's
Right.
really good feedback. So I understand from your background, you also worked in the intersection of music and intellectual property.
Yes.
What advice would you give based on stories that you've either been a part of or seen on things that people have done around their IP?
Wow, that's a that's a good question. We've had a lot of activity, litigation,
Hmm.
fights, in groups. And I won't name any specific groups, but unfortunately, well, folks get together and everything is wonderful.
Yes.
They get this record deal and things are great.
Yes.
But then one party, may believe that he or she is more important to the group than others.
Yes.
And there's infighting.
Yes.
And so that's when everybody starts to think about, well, who owns the name? And
that's a good
I
point.
can't tell you. And and then what happens is that everybody runs to the trademark office. So you have 2 or 3 or 4 different competing trademark applications.
Okay.
So I think it's important to get that locked in early on.
Okay.
When representing artists early on, before they would sign with a record label, we would make sure that the artist had protected the name so that the label couldn't make any claims to it. So that's important as well, even with respect to some of the individuals. Everybody is focused on, merchandising these days, and making sure that they carve out those rights. And so it's important, that, again, your names and stage names are protected, so that, you can maximize the merchandising potentials.
That's important too. So you want the name for the merchandising upside, because merch is huge. That's a huge part of the revenue, especially if you're touring and things like that. What stories have you seen where people didn't have their IP protected, or in a song, or if you saw licensing go wrong? Any examples of that from the industry?
Yeah, we see a lot of that in the on the music side with copyrights. Folks going to the studio and come up with this song and no paperwork is signed. And
what about with sampling?
The splits. Sampling is a different beast. Sampling is, labels are smarter now than they used to be. But we're out, but a lot of music is being released outside the labeling context. But, nowadays, no label is going to release a song without getting it cleared. And there's been a whole industry of companies whose only job is to clear music. So you're not going to.
So not as much as it
used
to be.
You're not going to have the every dream you take, every breath you take, every dream you make situation.
Wait, what was that situation?
That was the the Puffy P. Diddy situation.
What happened?
Well, after Biggie, the notorious B.I.G. died, he did a song that sold millions of records.
I remember that
song. They sampled the Every Breath You Take. I believe that was a Sting song, something like that. And it was very successful before he used it. But, Diddy used to use a lot of pre-recorded music and samples. But that one wasn't cleared prior to release. And you can, go on any YouTube or wherever, and you can see Sting talking about just how much money he was making per day off of that, because they hadn't cleared it beforehand.
So you don't want to be out here building somebody else's IP portfolio, because what they did was they didn't clear the rights, and then therefore they had to pay.
Well, you still build it, because had they licensed it prior to, they still would have been paying for the uses of it. But when you don't, secure those licenses in advance, then
the price goes up.
The price goes up significantly.
Yes.
The owner of the copyright calls the shots.
Okay. So, well, I love these stories. These are great anecdotes, and all of the reasons why we have to make sure that as we're out here building businesses, as we are out here making music, that we are taking the appropriate steps with our legal counsel to make sure that it's protected. Absolutely. Has there ever been a time where someone had an idea and their attorney may say, no, that's not important. You don't need to cover that.
I'd imagine so. When it comes to ideas, we're typically talking about patents,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, inventions and things like that. And I caution myself and others, lawyers, to stay out of it.
Mm.
Stay out of the viability part.
Okay.
Because that's not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Our job, let's say on a patent, would be to um, to explore and advise the client on the
Okay.
patentability.
Okay.
And we do that through patent searches and things like that. But yeah, it's the one uh invention that comes to mind that most attorneys probably would have laughed at is the coffee cup sleeve, that piece of cardboard that
Mm. Just wraps
it just
around.
wraps around. And I can imagine the inventor walking into the patent attorney's office with a piece of cardboard saying,
Just
I want to patent this. But of course, that's been patented, and
mm.
most of us can't go to a convenience store and buy a cup of coffee without using it. Otherwise, you'll burn your hand.
Yes.
And millions and millions of dollars have been made.
And I think that's an important lesson, right? Because I can only imagine what it looked like for somebody to walk in with a cup and a piece of paper wrapped around it and saying, hey, this is my idea, right?
Mm.
And then they might have gotten laughed at.
Absolutely.
But it's still important to protect it no matter what other people may think,
Absolutely.
what the other positions may be.
Absolutely.
You have to protect your ideas. And so that's so important when it comes to building wealth, because we've heard so many stories in our community about things that have been stolen,
Right.
things that have been taken,
Sure.
things that we have not seen the revenue from. And it's time out for us not seeing the fruits of our labor, right? We're in an era where we can be empowered around that. So we definitely have to do it.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes some of the simplest things can be the most lucrative um, items in one's portfolio. So,
I love it.
yeah.
I'm here for the simple and the lucrative. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show today. This has been a great extended interview with Todd Pilot, IP attorney extraordinaire. And this is the Wealth Agenda with your host, Tania Brielle Mabrey.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, it's been amazing.